Thank you for joining us this evening, everybody. I'm Zach Morris from the Cosmic League. We're here to talk about The Walking Dead. It's been going on a little hiatus on the show. It's coming back this Sunday. Let's talk about some differences between the comic, the TV show, and where it might go going forward with the comic. I know the TV show hasn't always followed the comic, but it might give you an idea of what may come on the TV show. So let's jump right into it. The major differences that you have to know if you don't read the comic, first of all, is Daryl. Anyone that watches the show is a huge fan of Daryl. He's not in the comics at all. So Daryl is out, and to fill his void, what they've done is kind of taken some attributes from Daryl, and Dwight has taken over some of those attributes. So Dwight has the crossbow and a lot of Daryl's attributes. But Daryl is he's not in the show, or he's not in the comic at all. That's one of the major things, obviously. So without Daryl, there's no Merle. That whole part of the show is just not in the comics at all. The other part that's really a standout between the comics and the TV show is Andrea. Andrea is a major character in the comic books. I can't state that enough. She's probably the second biggest character to Rick Grimes. So Andrea dies pretty early off in the show. In the comics, she's alive and well, and she's also Rick's love interest, which in the show they've kind of attributed towards Michonne. She's kind of filled that part of her character. That's a really big part of the comics that's way different than the TV show. Another big thing that you'd have to know is Carol. Carol is dead in the comics, but on the TV show, she's alive and well, and she's kind of filled that void where Michonne is. Michonne is very much in the comics a love interest to Ezekiel, and in the comics, Carol, it seems like they are setting up to be that person.
You really gotta try one of these.
They've kind of taken some character attributes and distribute them through a couple different characters to make up the differences between the comic book and the TV show. Another huge difference, which they hinted on the TV show, is the loss of Rick's arm. Rick loses his arm pretty early in the comic books in an altercation with the governor. Him and the governor get into it pretty much right upon meeting, and the governor chops off Rick's arm, which is a huge difference because he has a prosthetic arm. It handicaps him in such a big way. They kind of teased it with Negan. But that's a major difference between the TV show and what they do in the comic books. It definitely affects the storyline. It's a major plot point. So if you're watching this, you're probably wondering what happens with Negan, because everyone is. It's very exciting. He's a dramatic character. He's very much the big bad in The Walking Dead. So right now we're at the point where we're kind of at a crossroads, and Rick has decided to actually fight back against Negan. So in the comic books, here's what happens. Obviously, spoilers are in full effect here. In the comic books, Rick bands together with the other communities, being the Kingdom and the Hilltop, and they decide they're not going to take Negan's stuff anymore. Dwight decides that he is going to rebel against Negan as well, which is big. You kind of see shades of it right now in the show, but in the comics, yes, it definitely happens. Dwight is going to rebel against Negan. As you can tell, a lot of the Saviors aren't huge fans of the way he decides to run the Saviors as pretty much a dictator. So in the comic books, right now we're at the point where Rick has decided to stand up for himself. But in the comics, when the altercation happens where Negan goes to collect and he cuts Spencer,
You got no guts.
and stabs him. It's a lot different in the comic books. So what happens is, after killing Spencer, Rick shows up very much like he did in the show. He's out collecting for Negan, but in the comics he shows up and they get into an altercation. This pretty much starts the beginning of the war. Negan comes, they fight, Rick and Negan start going back and forth, and Ezekiel comes to the aid of them and scares off Negan and the Saviors as they leave. That's very much a big part of the comics. Carl shoots Lucille, which just pisses Negan off, as you can imagine, and the war pretty much begins. Rick comes, they start fighting. Negan explains to everyone at Alexandria that there's a reason that he takes a while to come, and there's a reason he shows up unexpectedly for his collections. It's because he has snipers waiting, ready, locked on to everybody, which he demonstrates. So with the snipers there, Andrea, who's a huge part in the comic still, is up in the bell tower and she's out there as their sniper. So they kind of have this showdown with the two snipers and Andrea wins. Andrea, they send someone up to the bell tower to stop her. She takes them out, which is unexpected to Negan. And it forces Negan to retreat when Ezekiel and his people from the kingdom show up. And Negan goes back with the saviors. They retreat. So at this point, they're discussing what to do. And Rick decides they have to keep the fight going. So Rick takes everyone and decides to attack the saviors. When he gets there, they realize the zombies are outside. It's well guarded. They have a great higher ground on them. And they start attacking, but it's an unorthodox approach. Rick decides to send his snipers to shoot out the glass in the facility that they're at, and it attracts a horde of zombies. So now, instead of attacking them head on, zombies start basically rushing the compound that Negan's in. And Negan finally realizes what's going on and is forced to deal with that. So that's another huge difference. So they attack and they let a herd just come in on them. So Holly gets captured, which is a big point because in the comics, Negan thinks that Holly is Rick's love interest, which she's not, but he mistakes that and thinks he has a huge edge on Rick. Everyone that has combined the Hilltop, the Kingdom, and Alexandria, they retreat then and leave the Saviors to deal with the horde of zombies they've just pretty much led to them. At this point, Negan realizes what's happened and has to somehow take care of the zombies because he knows it's going to be a bigger problem than it should be. After defeating the zombies, we can only assume because Negan is able to leave, the other communities decide it's a good idea to take out the outpost that Negan has before they find out what's going on, that they're revolting and taking out Negan's army. At this point, Ezekiel goes with the kingdom and he tries to take out one of the outposts. It goes horribly wrong. So Ezekiel's fighting with the outpost, his men get subdued, it's a lot bigger than they thought, and they are also surrounded by a horde of zombies. This is where it gets really sad because Shiva comes and saves Ezekiel, taking out a bunch of zombies, some saviors, but she gets subdued. There's too many zombies around, Ezekiel is about to die, and Shiva comes in to rescue him. She gets killed by the zombies, which is just heartbreaking to watch. Hopefully we see something like that in the show. I'm not really sure, but I really love to see Shiva in action like she is in the comics. So, Negan's attacking with the grenades. They retreat, they get held off by Alexandria. As they're retreating, a savior mentions to Negan that why are we retreating? And Negan says, look back, we've won. And the smoke is rising. He's pretty much destroyed a large portion of Alexandria. He also, on the way out, captures Eugene, which is big. It's kind of like in the show where he wants Eugene to make ammo for him. It happens a lot later in the comic. So he captures Eugene and wants to force him to make ammo for him. After Alexandria gets the grenade attack, they have to move to the hilltop. Once they get back, the saviors have a big meeting and Negan comes up with a plan to destroy the other communities. His plan is now to take their weapons and get them infected with all the zombies they have. On the show, you see them. The zombies are kind of chained to things outside of their compound. He takes Lucille and he rubs Lucille with all sorts of zombie guts and everything. And the idea is that now they have an advantage because they'll strike people with these weapons that are infected and these people will then turn. So that's Negan's new plan, and he has everyone in the Saviors do so. After coming up with a new plan, Negan makes a great speech that's hilarious, and he rallies the troops. They go back and decide to attack again. They go to Alexandria, and he orders Dwight, who's dipped his arrows in zombie goo, to shoot Rick. During the battle, Rick is wide open, and Dwight has a shot on him. Now, Negan doesn't know Dwight is in the rebellion against him. But after Dwight has so much pressure on him, Negan keeps yelling at him, he decides to finally shoot Rick. He hits him in the side, and Negan and his troops retreat. Negan thinks the war is over because they've killed Rick. Rick doesn't know it yet, but he's infected because of the zombie goop on the arrow. And he tells his troops that he's pretty much already won the war because without Rick chopping the head off of the snake, it's over. After retreating, after Dwight shoots Rick, they think they've won. They set up camp just outside the hilltop and decide to wait again for the next day because by then Rick should be infected and the war is pretty much over. The next morning, they decide to attack the hilltop again and they call out. Negan calls out and says, whoever your leader is now, have him come out and you guys can surrender. To his surprise, Rick comes back out. Rick got a fever, but it didn't infect him. He wasn't infected, he doesn't turn, and so Negan is really shocked when he sees this. They get into a discussion and more of a debate, and Rick says that he's been doing this all wrong, that he doesn't need to go about it this way, he doesn't need to be a dictator, and that they could work together, that all the communities could band together, they could trade, and the people that are living and have started these communities should really be working together to live in the zombie apocalypse. Negan hesitantly agrees with him, and that's when Rick slices Negan's throat. Negan doesn't die, it's not a mortal wound, but it hurts him, they're taken aback, and they get into a fist fight. Now this is when things get great. So the final battle, Rick versus Negan. We're fighting, it's back and forth, and Rick gets his leg broken. It snaps it, Negan just snaps his leg. But because of the wound that Rick inflicted on his neck, Negan starts to bleed out and passes out from the blood loss. Rick decides that he's not going to kill Negan and ends up throwing him in jail, where he tells him he will die an old man in prison. And that's where we end the saga of Rick versus Negan, and we move on to the Whisperer War. Now, the Whisperer War has kind of already been hinted at on the show. You've seen a mysterious figure watching as Rick was wading through the zombie pool, getting to that little lake house. So you've kind of seen little hints at the Whisperers, but in the comics, the Whisperers are a very formidable foe. The Whisperers are a group of people who kill the undead and then wear their skin and live among them. They walk amongst the undead, the zombies, and wear their skin as a disguise. They also are called Whisperers because that's how they communicate. If they're not too loud, they don't rattle the dead and they're never noticed. So in the comic books, it flashes forward 2 years, 2 whole years since the battle with Negan, and Negan is still a prisoner in Alexandria in the basement of Rick's home in a jail cell. Carl visits Negan on a regular basis, and Negan refers to them as friends. He asks him for advice about girls. It's a very good dynamic between the two of them. As you know in the show, Negan takes a liking to Carl, so it's good to see the back and forth continues. The other thing that happens is, in the 2 years, Rick has become old and battered. He is a god amongst everyone in the communities. All the communities are working well together. Dwight has taken over the Saviors. You have Ezekiel still at the Kingdom. You have Rick at Alexandria, and Maggie runs the Hilltop. So they've become this tight-knit communities that work together. They trade in exchange of goods, and they work really well together. And Rick has become something of legend. The war with Negan has become this tale that you tell your children, and all the kids in the different communities know Rick Grimes as a legendary war veteran. His leg is still battered, and he walks with a limp now due to the injury he has sustained fighting Negan. So Rick Grimes is more of a legend than an actual warrior 2 years from the actual fight with Negan. So Carl is very much a legend, just like his father, and the Grimes are very well respected within all the communities. The roads to the different communities are well guarded. They are on constant patrol with basically police officers from the different communities. You have someone from the Kingdom, they're all in armor on horses, and they make sure you can have safe passage from community to community. The Saviors, although part of the communities, are still kind of the outcasts. Things are always a little weird ever since Negan and everything. Dwight is in control of them. He's the leader of the Saviors, but it's still a little odd between them. There's still a little tension there. The other major thing is Carl decides that he wants to go to the Hilltop, and all the children pick up a trade in the communities. Carl would like to leave Alexandria with his father and Andrea, who live together, are in very much a serious relationship. Carl wants to go away and go to the Hilltop with Maggie, where he will become a blacksmith, as they have one there. So that happens. Carl goes out there, he's going to stay with Maggie, and Rick isn't crazy about it, but he lets it slide. Also, Jesus is still a huge part. You see him in the TV show, he's a huge part of the comics. Jesus goes on patrol, and on patrol, they find a group of zombies, a herd. They are able to now successfully move a herd and distract them into moving a different direction rather than oncoming into one of the communities. During one of these runs, it is found out that there is actually a member in the zombies that's one of the Whisperers. That's how they first interact with the Whisperers. They get attacked by the Whisperers. And it's because they're in their area. The Whisperers are not aggressive just towards everyone. They don't go looking for trouble, but when you go into their area, they fight back. Now, there's a couple things you need to know about the Whisperers. Not only are they creepy, but they have a leader. Their leader is Alpha. They have decided that they are animals, and people are animals, and that they don't need names. So Alpha is the leader. She's a woman. She has a shaved head, and she is the leader of the Whisperers. Her muscle is Beta. Beta is her second in command. He's a giant man. He kind of looks like the Undertaker, and his signature look is they all wear undead skin as a disguise. His is cut off around the nose, and you still can see his chin and his mouth features. So he has like a little mullet going, and you can see his mouth, and he's a towering person. In the comics, he looks about 7 feet tall. I'm not really sure, but he's very big, and he's the muscle. So if anyone messes with Alpha, they get Beta. So those two are the leaders. They don't believe in rape anymore. There's no such thing. Animals don't ask permission to have sex, and they think that's how it should be. It's like nature. It's just wild animals. So Alpha has a daughter named Lydia. She is part of the group that attacks Jesus, and she's taken into custody. They bring her back, and that's when they explain what happened to the community. During that explanation, they decide to let Lydia stay with them. She's first taken as a prisoner, and she's let loose. Carl immediately is drawn to Lydia and attracted to her, and they wind up having somewhat of a relationship. They have sex, and that's where Carl is informed of how women are treated with the Whisperers. And Carl's not a big fan of this, so Carl's really upset. He thinks it's not right, and he thinks we should attack. He thinks the community should attack the Whisperers. They should keep Lydia, which is going to be a problem, and that's how our conflict first starts. So when they go, Lydia, they go to see the Whisperers, and that's where they meet Alpha. They talk, and Alpha, although hesitant, decides Lydia is better off staying with a community like this, where there's guidelines and her daughter won't be raped. She'll be better off with them, but she can't show that in front of her clan, the Whisperers. She can't show that. So she kind of pulls Rick aside. She tells them that that's what she'd rather have, and that Lydia is free to go with them. Carl's happy, and Carl lives in the hilltop. He has Lydia there, and Sophia, who's very much alive. She's not dead like in the TV show. Carol's daughter. She was raised by Glenn and Maggie. So Sophia and Carl are very close friends, and in their friendship, Sophia is being bullied. She's being attacked by a couple kids in the community, and Carl defends her. He's witness to this attack, and Carl beats 2 kids nearly to death. This causes some very big problem in the community, and Maggie is questioned as their leader. Ezekiel and Michonne, very much love interest. I mentioned it earlier. Michonne and Ezekiel, within the last 2 years that you haven't seen, have fallen very much in love, gotten very serious, and that's when Michonne pulls away. She's afraid. She feels like she doesn't deserve to be happy after everything she's lost. She's very much damaged, and she cannot see herself being happy. She doesn't feel right being happy. So she breaks up with Ezekiel. She spent a lot of time at the kingdom with Ezekiel, and they know her very well. So she goes on fishing trips and looks to gather commodities and goods for trades with the communities. Rick is also working on a huge fair, a big first annual fair where all the communities will get together. They'll sell goods. They'll have different entertainment for everyone. It's a good thing, and he's been working on it for quite some time. This is also happening at the same time as we're getting introduced to Whisperers. So during this fair, that's when Alpha decides to come in. She comes in disguise. She takes off her usual undead skin that she wears, and she goes into the fair. Now, with all the people and all the commotion with the first annual fair, no one notices that Alpha is not from any of the communities. She individually takes a couple key members out one by one, asks them to go out, and she kills them. At the end of the comic, you find out that Alpha kills Rosita, who's a major character. She kills Ezekiel. She kills a lot of main characters, a bunch of people from every community, and leaves them on spikes, Game of Thrones style, to make a border of where you cannot cross, where the Whisperer's territory is. This is obviously devastating to Michonne. This is obviously devastating to Rick, and all this 2 years of peace is gone now. They obviously have to go to war. Speaking of Rosita, flash forward 2 years, and she's in a relationship committed to Eugene. They kind of hint at it on the show, and you see Eugene's very much in love with her. She doesn't feel 100% the same way, but I feel like she feels safe with Eugene. So you find out that she's pregnant early on in the comics after the whole war with Negan, and she's not pregnant with Eugene's child though. Eugene is so much in love with her that he says it's okay and he will raise the child as his own, and it's better not to tell anyone. We do not find out whose child she's having, but Rosita's story is cut short as Alpha has her killed and you find her beheaded. Eugene is devastated and the story moves on. So Michonne feeling wrong that she never got to tell Ezekiel how much she loved him and how sorry she was, and Eugene is very upset about Rosita. So the whole community, every one of the communities now has to band together again. They look to Rick, the war veteran, as to what to do in this time with the Whisperers attacking. So Rick is able to rally the troops. He still has Negan to worry about, and he also has the rest of the communities who kind of look down on him. Carl has upset some people at the hilltop with him attacking the children there, defending Sophia. People have questioned Maggie. So that's caused a little bit of upset and distress between the community. Also because it's Rick's kid, people think they're taking it light on Carl. So between those two things, there's a little bit of upheaval against Rick and Maggie. People are starting to question them. One of the children, his parents die. One of his parents dies on the attack with the Whisperers, and he decides that he wants to let Negan out. He goes downstairs, he tells Negan that he wants his help, and that he's gonna lead Negan to the Whisperers. Because he hates Rick at this point, and he thinks, what better way to get Negan, Rick's enemy, and bring him to the Whisperers, where they can team up and destroy as many people as possible. Negan goes with him, and ends up killing the kid as they get closer to the Whisperers. He just can't take it anymore, and Negan ends up killing the kid. Negan goes to the Whisperers, and he's very much intrigued by the whole concept of them wearing people's skin, and he's very much turned on by Alpha. So he decides to join them. He goes to them. Beta is automatically uneasy by Negan. Negan's able to get himself more and more into the Whisperers. Alpha starts trusting him a little bit, and he even finds himself alone with Alpha one night talking and lulls her to sleep, and then he kills Alpha. He cuts her head off and brings it to Rick as a token. He shows Rick that he can be trusted, and that instead of running away, he left and he killed his enemy. So Negan's kind of turned a corner here, and in the comics he's very likable at this point. You've kind of forgotten that he's killed Glenn and Abraham and done these horrible things, and Negan is kind of an asset. Rick kind of trusts him at this point because he did. He could have just left and helped the Whisperers attack, and instead he took their leader, cut her head off, and brought it to Rick. Rick's not 100% comfortable with Negan being on his own, so he puts Dwight in charge of watching Negan. At this point we have Negan and Dwight together, and they are out, and they encounter later on Beta and some of the Whisperers. The Whisperer War is full on at this point. The Whisperer War is not much of a war compared to Negan's. All the Saviors, the Kingdom, the Hilltop, they're able to come together, Negan included, and they're able to overcome the Whisperers. Negan gets Lucille back, which is an epic moment in the comics. He compares it to his magical sword, and he beats up Beta with it. It's great. So hopefully that happens in the TV show. Also, recently in the comics, throughout a monthly publication, they've been printing out Negan's backstory, which I expect we will probably see in the TV show. Negan has a very, very cool backstory. You almost feel for the guy after reading it. So Negan, turns out he was a gym teacher, he was married, and he had an affair. He finds out his wife is very sick, she has cancer, and decides to cut off the affair. He feels terrible about her. She's in the hospital dying, and that's when the zombie apocalypse breaks out. This is when you find out that Lucille is actually the name of Negan's wife. So Lucille dies, and after dying, she turns, which he wasn't expecting. She turns, and him, with the help of another boy in the hospital, they're able to kill her, and they wander off into the zombie apocalypse. The boy dies, and other people that Negan meets up with, they die. And just recently you find out with one of the people Negan meets up with and joins is none other than Dwight. So that's where we're at in Negan's backstory right now. So hopefully they explore that in the TV show, and it'll be really fun to see Negan's story go from such a low point where he's hated and just absolutely revolted by fans for what he's done. Jeffrey Dean Morgan does such a good job that some people can't help but like him anyways. But hopefully if it follows the comics, you will see Negan make that turn, and you'll see his character fleshed out, and you'll actually feel bad for him, and you'll see Negan and Rick working together in the zombie apocalypse. We can only hope. So stay tuned to the show. Stay tuned to the Cosmic League. Hopefully we brought some insight into what's going on in the comic book world, and you can move that into what you can expect on the TV show The Walking Dead, which premieres again this Sunday and the second half of the season. Hopefully it gets into some things we discussed. I know you like this video. Tell your friends to watch the video. Check us out at the Cosmic League. Check out the comic reviews, the weekly Cosmic Minute, and make sure you check out all our video game reviews as well. Follow us on Twitter, follow us at Instagram at the Cosmic League. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.